24 minutes to 6 the time. Let's go back to our main story here on Good Evening Wales. The Prime Minister says the radicalisation of British Muslims poses a big threat to the country. It's emerged over the weekend that 2 young men from Cardiff were seen in a recruiting video for the ISIS militant group, which is taking over much of northern Iraq, with a third thought to be in Syria. So how can we stop young people being radicalised? Is it the job of families, the government, or does everyone have to be involved? Let's speak to Usman Nawaz, who's a former member of the Young Muslims Advisory Group. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us. There are so many questions here, I suppose, and for people people locally, but anyone looking at what we now know about these young men. They were young men. They were from good backgrounds. They went to mainstream schools in Cardiff. I mean, the question is, what on earth happened there?
Well, this is it. It's one of the most remarkable things. These are well-spoken young people that we see in the video, articulating themselves in a very kind of professional manner. And yet these are the very people who have been brainwashed into believing that they are partaking in a noble cause. They are a part of this global jihad, if you like. What they present in that video is a very romantic HD picture of jihad, if you like, sat around having a laugh and a joke as if they're around a campfire. The reality, of course, is much different to that, because we know that the theological and ideological justification by which they are taking part in these struggles is that they think, especially in Iraq, that it is lawful to shed the blood of other Muslims that they do not consider to be Muslims. This very warped understanding and narrow-minded interpretation of the Quran and the prophetic traditions means that anyone becomes a legitimate target. And I think what we have to realize is that, yes, people do have grievances about Syria. We have grievances about the way the state of Iraq and how it was left by the Allied forces, but there are ways and channels that those grievances ought to be aired. Resorting to violence, resorting to travelling to those countries which you do not know, which these young people have no idea about the political structures or the setup in those countries to take part in the struggles there, is just not acceptable.
And how do you feel, and how do other people you've spoken to today, other young Muslims, feel about the fact that there is this focus on their youth? I mean, I suppose many young people, whatever their religion or their background, there's this idealism of youth, and perhaps, do you think it's fair to say that it is obvious that they would be targeted because of their youth?
I think some young people are susceptible to radicalisation. We have to look at how this radicalisation is happening. It's not the old way of, the local kind of guy down the street and everybody gathered at his house and watched videos of Israeli atrocities taking place in Gaza and things like that. This is actually radicalisation happening in the privacy of your own bedroom using the internet. This is radicalisation happening on your iPhone using Twitter and looking at the hashtags that organizations like ISIS, literally hijacking the hashtags of the World Cup and other things, are putting out there. Radicalization is now so much easier to do for those who want to do it. The means and the ways of radicalizing susceptible young people are incredibly vast, more than they were even 5, 6, 10 years ago. So there's a lot of that happening that we need to take into account. We need to look at how the role of this new social media that ISIS is really coming onto. How do we combat that? Majority of the conversations that I've had with young people, in all of them, that they have said that going out there to fight is completely unacceptable. I know of people who have travelled for humanitarian purposes and travelled to the border regions with Iraq and Syria and Jordan as well. But going there to fight is completely unacceptable, especially going across now to Iraq and partaking in a sectarian war. It's not what Islam is about. It's certainly not what jihad is about.
Okay, thank you for your time this evening. Usman Nawaz there, who's a former member of the Young Muslims Advisory Group.